Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the #1 marketing and practice growth podcast for high-performing private practice hearing care leaders. It's Friday, and this is my end-of-week roundup of what's top of mind after 7 days of helping some of the world's best private practices to attract high-quality patients, fight the evil forces of manufacturer-owned chains, and be impossible to compete with. My name's Ollie Luke. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and let's have a chat. All right, so look, here we are, and I've done my due diligence on you, and born in New York, grew up in Arizona, now in California. Help me understand where and when we bumped into hearing care as a career path.
Yeah, great question. So what happened is I always wanted to be a physician, and my father was a cardiologist, now retired. And, after moving to Arizona from New York, I was only about 4 years old. My whole life, medicine, that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And eventually, once I went to undergrad at University of Arizona, I realized, this isn't, something's got to change. And I moved back home with my folks and ran into a hearing aid dispenser. And I didn't know anything about hearing care or hearing loss, in fact. And she had a lab coat on. She had a stethoscope around her neck, which is kind of, even in hindsight, I still wonder why she had that. But she had a stethoscope, not a listening tube, which a lot of people will tell me, oh, it's probably listening. No, it was a real stethoscope. And I asked her, I said, so what is it that you do? And she said, I help patients who have hearing loss with hearing aids and other treatments. Now, the other treatments, there were no other treatments. It was just hearing aids. And I thought that was fascinating. And she's, the phrase that she used is, I'm like a doctor who takes care of patients. And I thought, oh, that's neat. I've always wanted to be a doctor. So tell me more. And she said, well, why don't you shadow me for a day and see if you like it? And I did, and joined her small little outfit in Phoenix. And I stayed on for about a year and a half. And during that year and a half, I realized there has to be more to what we were doing. I mean, she had not given me any educational tools, no books. So I finally asked her, I was like, is there anything that I can do to learn more about hearing loss? And she said, no, there's not really any books and this and that. And I thought, okay, well. And mind you, this is well before, Google or even ChatGPT, of course. But the idea was that she didn't have any information. And so luckily, I'm so lucky that I actually met an audiologist. Her name was Jody Cook. She was an audiologist at Arizona State University. And I met her at this meeting, in the state meeting. And she said, this is what we do. And I said, oh, that's what I do. She's like, no, that's not what you do. You're a hearing aid dispenser, not an audiologist. And I thought, well, what's the difference? She said, why don't you come take an intro to audiology course at Arizona State? It's over the summer. You'll see what it's all about. So I went the first day. I thought, oh, this is what I do every day. Now, this is a 30-day course, and the first day, basically my year and a half of working with this dispenser wrapped up into one day. Day two, I had no idea what we were talking about. That's when I realized, okay, I got to get into audiology. And so from there, I went into audiology, never looked back. And I'm not saying any of this is a negative to hearing aid dispensers, because I have a lot of well-respected close friends who are dispensers. So I want to make that very clear. But the idea is that the knowledge base, at least back then, was very different. And that could be a one-off situation as well. So that's kind of how I got into audiology. I was in Arizona. I actually moved out of Arizona in 2008, and I went up to the Pacific Northwest. Started working with a clinic. They were looking to exit at some point, and it was a husband and wife team. After about 3 years or so, I finally just made a full offer on their practice, bought them out, expanded the clinic. Really grew it. We I know people talk about Grant Cardone and 10X. Well, we 3X'd it, which is, I think is still pretty fantastic. We 3X'd the business, and instead of growing, we decided, the clouds and the rain, probably too much for us. And, there was probably some depression setting in, and there's something called seasonal affect disorder, SAD. And sure enough, people get pretty sad. So we moved to LA, and that's where we are now. Gotcha.
Yeah, I can relate to SAD. I live in the UK. Like, this is the darkness that you see is pretty much life, which is joyful. Okay, so that was 2008, and then you bought the practice, and now you continue to run the practice. And is this West Valley Hearing Center from my Google research?
Yeah, so actually I bought the practice up in the Pacific Northwest, which was it was called Audiology Clinic, and we were just outside of Portland, Oregon, and we had 2 locations. Sold it in 2017. So when I moved down to Los Angeles in 2017, I was looking to buy a practice because, as you know, when you sell a business, you've got cash and you want to put that cash to good use. So I thought, well, if I can do what I did in this small town of Vancouver, Washington, what could I do in a big city like Los Angeles? So let me buy a practice and then grow it. And I looked around, I talked to a lot of audiologists here, and nobody was really interested in selling at that point. So I said, maybe buying a practice isn't the best idea. So I ended up, I've met Jane Rosner before, Dr. Jane Rosner. She's an audiologist and she's been an audiologist since the 80s, but she started West Valley Hearing Center back in 2001 and she grew it. It's been a very successful practice. And when I, pinged her, she said, I don't want to sell, but maybe we can partner. And so that's what we've done. So I've partnered with Jane. So I kind of run the business side of things along with seeing patients full time. And she just sees patients. And so I do all the HR, the marketing, the professional development, you name it. I mean, I do basically everything, the bookkeeping to a certain extent. And so that's my role now here at West Valley Hearing Center in Los Angeles.
Gotcha. So the journey of buying a practice, growing it, and then selling a practice, like that's the ambition and goal of many practice leaders, right? Build it, sell it, have some money, maybe not move to LA, but hey, who can judge? But yeah, tell me that, like, what were some of the key lessons on that journey of taking a practice to exit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is one of those things where, some providers want to buy or start, scale, and exit. Some providers just want to get in there, work 9 to 5, basically, and then retire at some point. Most of us that are, entrepreneurs, if you will, or even just thought leaders in the profession, we like the idea of scaling and exiting. Lessons that you bring up. So, obviously, one thing I learned very early on is cash flow is very important. So, cash is king is the phrase. People don't realize that, you can make all these sales on hearing aids, but if the cash isn't in your bank account, it essentially means almost nothing. You can go bankrupt even though you're selling a lot of hearing aids. And so on paper, it sounds like you're doing great or looks like you're doing great until you actually have to pay your bills. And you're like, wait, where's all the money? So one of the things I learned early on was, making sure that we budget and appropriate the cash as needed. You can't say I sold 20 hearing aids this week. Let's go out and buy some expensive piece of equipment. You've probably got bills to pay. So cash flow was number one. I think the scaling part of it is great. I love scaling things and growing things, but also managing the growth is very important. And I think a lot of people start growing fast, and I know a lot of audiologists and hearing care professionals are not growing as fast as they'd like. But managing the growth is important. If you don't have the bandwidth to handle the growth, then you got to figure out what to do to manage that growth. So an example is when I bought that practice in the Northwest, we were doing about 500,000 and 3 audiologists. That's not the best. So when I started scaling, we were up to about 1.5 to 1.7 in revenue, but I was killing myself. I mean, I was there 7 a.m. to almost midnight, 5, maybe 6 days a week. And it wasn't a healthy thing, but that's because I wasn't managing the growth. So that's when we decided, 2016, 2017, let's add a couple of providers. And then we're like, you know what, instead of doing that, why don't we exit? So those two were the biggest lessons that I can tell you that I learned early on. And the other thing is that sometimes, and you know this better than me, but sometimes the classic marketing campaigns don't work, right? There's ebbs and flows, right? For a while, newspaper ads were big. Well, how many people are reading newspapers anymore? Well, that's people are still doing ads in newspapers, and that's fine. Direct mail or ed seminars, etc. There's ebbs and flows on when those work and when they don't work. And so I started thinking outside the box. Well, how do I market in a different way? So my marketing budget, which again, I know for a fact that you know this, even though I know this is our first time chatting, but a lot of clinics will budget, anywhere from 7 to 12% of their annual budget into marketing. I was less than 1% in our marketing because I was doing it based on relationships.
Mm.
And relationships in this industry is huge, but outside the industry with our physicians and our B2B relationships, I would go out and just meet and hang out and start talking, go to nonprofit events. I can't remember, I made up a term. I think I called it social marketing or something. I don't know what it was, but I made up some term that I said, this is what we do. And it just helped because who do you like to refer to? You like to refer to friends. I mean, I refer my patients to physicians that I know are very good, but they're also friends with me. So of course I'm going to refer to my friends. And same with audiology. If a patient says, hey, I'm going to be in Alaska for example, well, I'm going to refer that patient to Dr. Emily McMahon. I'm not going to refer to anybody else because I know that Emily's the best and she's my friend. And so I like that relationship. And so now, even here in LA, when I meet physicians and we hang out, I'll give them my text or my cell phone number. And I get text messages from physicians almost daily. And it's kind of cool. I like it. And they're the ones sending us patients. So that's kind of part of that marketing and managing the growth, which I think is very important.
Oh, I love that. I love spending 1%, right? And knowing how do I build no like trust relationships with key referral partners, become iconic in the community as a result of relationships and being known to be community focused rather than, you know, hiding in the practice and hoping people come in my direction. Yeah, I love that a lot.
Yeah, the ROI is so important, right? I mean, the money you invest in and what are you getting back? I
Yeah.
feel the 1% is great. It's a great ROI.
Absolutely. So when did AudBoss come about? Like what's the story there?
Good question. I love AudBoss. I think AudBoss is one of the best things that I was part of in creating. There's an audiologist. She's now retired. She retired in her 30s and moved from Naples, Florida to Vermont. I don't remember Commonwealth. I don't know. She's awesome, but they went full country on me. And I hope if she sees this, she'll laugh. It's out of respect and love. But April Royan, one of my very good friends, she had this idea. And the idea was, we've got all these Facebook groups and we've got all of these uh, avenues where, people can communicate with each other and learn from each other, but there's nothing for private practice owners. And that used to be ADA, the Academy of Doctors of Audiology. They've shifted away from that. And so, and I think people still think that, but there wasn't a good place for private practice owners, audiologists and dispensers to get together to really communicate. So she pitched me this idea, and we were at a Starkey event in Minnesota, and it was back in 2018, I think, 2017, 2018. It was around that time because I know there was a hurricane and she had to stay in Minnesota because she couldn't fly back to Florida. And she said, I've got this idea. And at first I actually said, I'm already tied up in a lot of things. I'm not really interested. And she kept pushing me. And then when we were at that Starkey event, we were sitting in a booth and I said, okay, let's do it. And I was thinking about doing something just for California because I had moved here in 2017. And I thought, let me do something just for private practices in California. But this was going to be a national thing. And so that's how it started. And we started the page with, I don't know, 5 or 10 practice owners. And we're up to about 1,300 now. And it's not just in the US. We have, like Chris Arnold and Stacey Arnold up in Canada. We've got a bunch from Canada and Ruhi Kassam and a bunch of others. We also have some in the UK. I think Matthew Pearson, for example, is a good buddy of mine. He's up in London and Asia and Australia and South Africa. We've got people all around the world now that are private practice owners who are on the AudBoss page. And so in 2018, I had an idea of doing these conferences, and the conference was basically built off the idea that I like to teach. And so I said, we can just get 2 or 3 audiologists and just teach people about private practice and what to do. Excuse me. So we developed the AudBoss Summit, and it started in 2019, and that was our first one. We hosted it in Naples, Florida, and we weren't sure how it was going to go. And so the funny part of the story is that April said, "Okay, we'll do it at my house." And she has a nice house, big backyard. We'd get tables and stuff, and we thought, okay, this will work because we only thought there'd be like 10 or 20 people. And we opened up the registration, and within like 4 or 5 days, we had like 70 people that signed up, and we thought, oh, we can't do this at your house. So now we're like, okay, how do we had to learn the whole, step by step. So we said, well, how are we going to do this? Well, we got to talk to a hotel or a venue. And so she lived in Naples. We had an agreement with somebody to come and speak. And so that person said they can only do it in Naples, Florida, or I'm not going to do it. And we said, okay, we'll do it in Naples, Florida. And then she backed out later on, which kind of sucked. But wish we had her on the contract, but we didn't. The idea is that we did it at the Hilton Naples, and we maxed out at 150 people at our very first AudBoss Summit with like 3 or 4 sponsors, and one of them being Starkey, and Starkey's been there from day one, and they've been our biggest supporters. So that's kind of how it started. Then of course the next year was a pandemic, and so we thought, how are we going to do this? Well, we still did it. We actually went to Denver in 2020 during the pandemic. I talked to the mayor and the governor and April as well, and we coordinated. And they said, well, as long as you only have 75 people. So we had 75 people, and we went, and not one person got sick. We were fairly careful, but of course, when you're all together, it kind of felt good to be kind of the rebels and not really have to wear masks when you're outdoors and stuff like that. So it was fun. And then it just kept going. And so we just wrapped up our sixth annual AudBoss Summit, which just happened on the cruise out of Miami, which of course we always joke every year we end up having some kind of drama that happens that, affects our summit. This year it was the hurricane that, went through Western Florida. So that kind of was terrible. We lost about 27 people who couldn't come last second due to the weather. Homes were in the path. But long story short, it ended up still being a fantastic time. And I like to measure it. I try to be as objective as I can. Of course, I'm very subjective, but I like to measure based off of the reviews from our attendees and then also from our sponsors. Because last year in Nashville, we had 42 sponsors at the AudBoss, which is huge. This year we could only, we had to cap it at 18 or 20 or something like that. And so I talked to the sponsors, and every single sponsor is like, we're going to be there next year. I'm like, that means something to me, right? I mean, it means hopefully that we're successful and we're doing something right. So that's AudBoss in a nutshell. Oddboss.com if you want to learn more. If you're a practice owner, you can go on Facebook and search AudBoss and answer the questions, and we'll let you know. We're very strict. Excuse me, I should say I'm very strict. One key piece of information I left out is I bought out April a couple years ago. So now I'm running the show by myself, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I love it. I know you're strict because I've tried sneaking in on at least two occasions, but you catch me out straight away. Maybe I need to buy a practice. Maybe that's the strategy there.
You should do that.
So, future of audiology. Obviously, there's a lot going on. Market's constantly changing. Apple have done their piece to try to have a stake of the market, whatever part of the market that is. What are your views about the next decade of audiology?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on audiology. I think on the hearing care side of audiology, if we just push aside vestibular and tinnitus and all that for now, if we just focus on the hearing care part of audiology, I don't think anything's going to change in a negative way. If anything, I think it's going to continue in a positive direction. One of the advantages of companies like Apple and Bose and Sony coming out saying, hey, we've got these over-the-counter devices is actually brings in a lot more attention to us. So when I was part of a campaign, and I know some people don't like this, but I was part of a campaign to really promote over-the-counter hearing aids because I foresaw that, hey, this is going to bring more, it's almost free advertising for us. And sure enough, excuse me, we helped Biden's administration. Actually, it started under President Trump. He was starting it. Pandemic hit, so of course everything paused. Biden picked it back up, and we had some conversations with the FDA and the Office of Budget, the White House Budget Office. I can't remember the exact name. And we got them to put some limitations in there. But of course, all of this became free advertising for us because people said, oh, look at all of this, all these discussions about hearing care. Oh, I'm at home during the pandemic. I have noticed, I'm not really hearing my family as well. And so let me go get an evaluation. I think our biggest year, no, that's not true, but bigger than it was supposed to be was 2020.
Yeah.
Right. Because we had so many people coming in, whether it was because they're tinnitus or their hearing loss. The great thing is that these devices that are coming out, we're trying to test them all. And I know there are companies out there that are saying, oh, yeah, we tested them and this one's the best one, better than prescription hearing aids. No, they're not. I'm sorry. We've done objective testing here, and I have no say. I don't have sponsors who are coming to me saying, hey, would you rate our device, and we'll pay you to do the research. And then, of course, then I want to make it sound good. We don't do that here, of course. We're doing it because my goal is if there's something that's going to work well for my patients and it's a low priced option, I want to be able to use it. In fact, we have a display in our waiting room just to put these over-the-counter devices. It's empty because I've tested a lot of them and they all stink. They're not good. I've ordered the ones on Alibaba just for fun because, a lot of the ones that are on the internet, they're actually from China, just rebranded, and they're terrible, terrible devices. The thing about Apple, because that's the one right now in 2024 that everyone, Q3, Q4 of 2024 that everyone's talking about. The issue that I feel is that number one, if somebody's wearing AirPods and I'm talking to them, without knowing that they're using it as a hearing device, I'd probably ask him, hey, can you take those out? Because I don't know if you're paying attention to me or listening to music.
Yep.
My daughter, who's 16 years old, has AirPod Maxes and she has it on transparency mode. I know because now she's told me I can hear you, but I don't know if she's listening to music or not. So I'm like, can you just take those off so I can talk to you? That's number one. Number two, and by the way, one of my I'll call him a friend. He's in the industry, not an audiologist, very, very brilliant guy. He told me a story just a few weeks ago when I was visiting their company, and he said, I work with a lot of Apple executives, and he lives in the Bay Area. And he told me the story, and I'm going to ruin the story because he says it so well. But he was talking to one executive. He goes, could you imagine, this is the Apple executive saying, could you imagine if I walked into a meeting with Tim Cook with AirPods on? The first thing he'd say is take those off, right? Apple executive talking about,
Love it.
their own devices. So I can't name names, but that was kind of interesting to hear that,
Mm.
yeah, but this is something that may not be as big of an impact in a negative way. And then the second or third, wherever I am on the list here, 4 to 6 hours on a battery life, and then you got to go put it in the charger. Now, I've been playing with it because I have AirPods, and sure enough, the other day, I think it was Sunday or Saturday last week, I had them in my ears, and I started at 7 a.m. and by 10:30, I got the little doo-doo-doo-doo, saying my battery was low, and I was like, I haven't even gotten to lunch yet. So I put in the charger and I waited, and finally it got charged up, put them back in my ears, and about 3, 4 hours later, again. And I thought, this is
Mm.
crazy. Like at some point, I'm not gonna do this, right? Having to do that. Now I know that you can buy a second set and maybe just swap them out. There's all kinds of things you can do, but why would you go through that problem, those troubles, right? It just doesn't make sense. So I don't think this is gonna be the end all. If anything, we have threats that come and go year after year.
Absolutely.
I know when I started the profession, there was a company called Songbird that had these devices, and where is Songbird now? Nowhere, right? Those things were terrible. It was a great concept, and a lot of people were worried about it. And then Hearing Planet came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, that we're done." They're gone, right? Or I think they're gone, and it just keeps happening. We keep getting these threats, and we unfortunately for the profession, we're not very strong fighters. I know I am, but I know that as a whole, unfortunately, audiologists are not very big fighters. And even though we're not fighting, we still tend to survive. And there's a phrase that I love to quote, and I can give him credit for this, but Douglas Beck, who I hope everyone knows, and if not, look him up. But Doug Beck's a great, I've been friends with him for years, and he said I could use this quote: the biggest problem or the biggest threat to audiology is audiologists. We're our biggest enemy. And all the things that I post online, and I know people don't like some of them. It's not because I'm trying to just rattle cages. I want to make a positive change. And I don't think we need three national organizations. We just need one, and it needs to only be for audiology, not incorporating physical therapists or speech pathologists or anybody else. We just need a single audiology organization, and I'm going to keep promoting that until I'm no longer able to promote it. So, long story short, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but the idea is that, yeah, I'm not worried about the Apple AirPods becoming the industry killer.
No, absolutely. I love that. So you have a reach with a lot of audiologists right across the world. And look, we have a lot of listeners to this. I'm sure we jump into the AudBoss community. But like, if there's one piece of advice that practice leaders get hung up on, or one thing that they could do a better job of in order to grow, scale, potentially exit, or build a better practice, where's the one focus now that you would give them?
Focus on your people, right? So focus on your people, your teams, help train them, get them dialed in, focus on your patients. I use this phrase, I posted this numerous times that my dad told me when I was a kid. You focus on the patients, the business will come, right? So if you focus on the money, you're not going to be successful. Focus on your patients, provide the best quality of service and treatment that you can for your patients. Cliff Olson's done a terrific job of educating the public. I don't care what other people say. I think he's done a fantastic job, and I fully support it. And we, of course, being in Los Angeles, we get a lot of those patients who are watching his videos, and they come in and they expect only the best. And the good news is the best and providing best practices, we just do that as like a standard. We say here's best practices. We do all those things as the base. Everything above that is, above and beyond. And we do all that just every day with every single patient. So I think that's what's helped us. And I try to promote that with other clinics, especially ones who are struggling. You focus on the patients, everything will work out. You focus on your teams, you train them, you talk to them, you listen to their phone calls. We're using AI now quite a bit in our office. And so we've got AI bots using, responding to patients. It's great. And those things really help because then it frees up the time for our staff to do things that are revenue generating. And I think that's the important thing is really focusing on your people. And that's really the only thing I can say. I think everything else, marketing and all those things that's a side thing. You got to focus on your people first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got a final little question because I'm very, very curious.
Okay.
Papa, can you hear me now? And just for clarity, that's your book title. I'm not just saying that to you in like this weird dynamic. But like, give me some context on why that book was written, what the goal of it was, like where that idea come from, because pretty cool little side project to write a book, right? That's related to the industry.
Yeah. I got nervous when you said it.
You weren't
I
in the
joke.
UK 32 years ago, were you?
Yeah, I was gonna joke and say, I wanted to call it Daddy. No, Daddy, you can't say that. So, in fact, I have the book right here, which I actually leave out for patients to read, and they love it. So, why did I do it? Well, I'm a very high level person, and details. I wish I could tell you that I'm a very detail oriented person. I'm really not. I'm more of the 30,000 foot level guy, and then let other people deal with the details, and that's partly a negative, of course, but during the pandemic, as I was sitting around, I said, there's a simple story that I hear from just about every single patient. And it's, what? I was during Thanksgiving. My dad or mom were here and they just sat quietly and didn't really interact. And, audiologists and the hearing care provider, we've heard this thousands of times from patients. And I thought, how can I put that down in a simple format? And I laughed because it only took me about 30 minutes to write the script. I mean, the book. I mean, the reality is it's kind of a children's book, but meant for adults. It's that's where the detail part kind of I got lost in because I thought, is this for kids or adults? I don't know. I'll just do it and get someone to illustrate it and draw the cartoons and so he did. That took about 6 to 8 months, which drove me nuts. I was like, just draw stick figures. I don't care. I just want something. I want to get it put out there. But I think it was good for education. And I appreciate you bringing up the book. It's not going to retire me by any means. I never thought it would. And in that, that's why I don't care about the money part of it. I care about, people. I can tell you the number of, I think over 100 audiologists have messaged me, look, we have it in our waiting room and they've taken selfies or pictures with it and sent them to me. And Shadi over at Staffing Proxy sent me a picture with her dog. She was reading it to her dog, and I think she called the dog the barking chief of I don't remember. There's some funny story, but long story short, it's really meant for education. And I got on Fox LA here in Los Angeles, and they wanted to interview me about the book, and it was great. A lot of my patients will come in saying, "Can you autograph the book?" I'm like, okay, that's weird. What do you want me to write? And I'll write whatever they say and, sign it. And so that's kind of fun, but it's really meant for, educating the public. We've done a terrible job over the past 100 years, 50 years. I don't know how many years audiology has been around. We've done a terrible job of educating the public about what we do and who we are. And I've been trying very hard my whole career, whether it's doing proclamations to the cities, getting on, news channels, doing little things that, promote the word audiology or the name audiology. And this book was one of those that, I wanted to highlight, hey, this is hearing loss. This is how it affects relationships. And the story is about a granddaughter who goes to visit her grandparents, and grandpa couldn't really hear everything that she was saying. And so she thought he was just ignoring her, and she got sad. And he goes to see an audiologist who ends up being my daughter's name, and gets hearing aids. And then the next time he hears everything she says, and they're all happy, right? Happy ending. So now we're looking at other storylines. I have people like, oh, you should do one for grandma. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. One of my buddies in Chicago, in Illinois, said, let's do one about cochlear implants. I'm like, we can do that. And so we're looking at different, I don't know. I think the one book was great. I'm happy to expand on it, but yeah, it's been really nice. And I hope people that don't know about it, of course, you can search for it on Amazon. I didn't want to buy 1,000 books and have to ship them out. So I was like, here, Amazon, you do it. And, I get my $2 or $3 per book. So uh, not retiring anytime soon.
I love it. I love it. So final thing on this, if people want to find more about AudBoss, about the community, about some of the work that you do, like where should they go? And I know you've mentioned it, but let's just make it super clear so everyone knows exactly what to type right now.
Yeah, AudBoss. So the main thing about AudBoss, if you're a practice owner or even at a certain point, if you're a practice manager, as long as the owner allows you to join, you can go on Facebook and just search for AudBoss. That's AUDBOSS, not ODD. That's a different context. So AudBoss, you can go on the website, audboss.com. If you want to learn more about any of the things I'm doing, you can go to Dr. Gosalia, that's DrGosalia.com. And of course, our clinic is westvalleyhearingcenter.com. So those are kind of the different areas. Of course, we've got TikTok accounts, which I don't encourage you to look at my TikTok, but the clinic ones are kind of fun. And of course, Instagram and LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And where's your next event next year?
It's going to be in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas. And we got the Hilton Austin. Had to change the dates because I think the weekend I chose was a very crowded weekend. And I moved the dates a little earlier. So we'll have a good 3-4 day event and it's going to be great.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. And I appreciate all you've shared.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
And there we have it. Another episode has come to an end. And I have a quick favour to ask. If you have found this helpful, then who do you know who should listen to this podcast? I strongly believe a rising tide lifts all boats, and right now, private practice needs to stick together to fight these big, gormless groups and these manufacturer-owned Goliaths that are looking to take market share from us. Consider who should be listening, pass on the word about the Business of Hearing podcast, and I'll see you again next week.